One, we did the basics. Day 2, we broadened that a little bit. And today we're going to be on applique and echo stitching. So here's what I've got on the frame today. And this is what we're going to make. So you see this Dresden plate here, and we have a circle in the center. We're going to applique around our other one that's sitting over here. We're going to do a quadrant of it, just because we're going to be probably short on time. Then we're going to applique stitch around this circle, and then we're going to do the echo. And this is like a little bit of a mug rug. So let's get right into it. On our home page for the app, we see that there's a button in the upper right called Appliqué Echo. So we press that, and we're going to use our laser offset. So I turn that on. And again, for those of you who don't know, when I'm setting points today, I will be using this laser pointer, which is offset from the needle. I find it easier to have it offset because I can see this, and it's not blocked by anything in this area, the hopping foot or the needle. So it asks me, the app asked me to choose quilting area, and that's in the upper left over here. It says choose quilting area. Now, in traditional Appliqué Echo, if we were doing the whole procedure, I would choose the block that my applique is in, because I would be doing an applique stitch or a decorative stitch around the applique, and then echoing it out to that block, so we want to encompass that complete area of the block. But for today's purposes, when we're only doing a quadrant down here on the fabric here, when we're only doing a quadrant, I just have to make sure my quilting area is bigger than that quadrant. So I'm just going to select points that are bigger than that quadrant. And again, I'm looking at that laser dot. And then I say done. Now, I choose over here, I made a choice to be an open path, because when I just do a quadrant, it's just part of it. It's just a quadrant of it. So it's an open line from one point to down here. And I'm going to outline these points. Now, this is where it gets really you got to pay attention. But the payoff is really good. So I'm looking at my laser, and I'm going to set a point. Just tap the screen. And I want to make sure that I do this really good on camera live. So I'm going to be as precise as I can, to make sure that laser point is right at the intersection. If this hand is the fabric edge and this is the bottom, and then I want to make sure that that laser is right, almost split in half between that edge of the fabric and out here into open space. So I'm going to set my points, and I'm going to do the end points and a center point. And you notice when I'm at this point right here, something strange is going to happen around that point when I'm all done. So be ready for that. Because when we do these applique stitches, or these satin types, well, not really satin. If the density was tight, it would be a satin stitch. But when we do this applique type of stitch, when it comes to the points, we want the stitch to actually fire in a certain direction. Otherwise, it kind of looks goofy. So I come down to this tip, come over here, and again, I'm just doing the midpoints because we're a little pressed for time. So I've made my selections, and I press done. So now that's what it's going to stitch out as. Now, if you look, I'm going to draw on the tablet here. If you look, you can see right there at these corners, you can see, I don't like the way that stitch looks. So we can, with these little arrows, arrow to that node that we selected and call it an anchor point. And then once it knows it's an anchor point, it sets the angle to bisect. It sets the angle of that stitch to bisect the angle of the line around it. And that's pretty cool. So basically, In layman's terms, it just makes it look better. So when you have a point like this, instead of the stitch firing along the axis this way, it just fires nice at the point. So it looks nice. If you're doing this by hand in a hand sewing machine or on a sewing machine on a table, you try to have that do the same thing. At this point, look at our selections over here on the left. We can modify that applique stitch. And I think I want to make that stitch, well, the line width to be consistent with what I've already done is 0.15, which sounds good. The space in between the stitches, I'm going to set to 1/4 of an inch. And the angle that that stitch is made, I'm going to leave it at 90 degrees. So as it's stitching around this, it's going to set a stitch perpendicular to it. But we can take a look at it. What if I change that to, say, 60 degrees? You can see that it starts skewing those stitches off at 60 degrees. It still leaves the anchor stitches bisecting the angle, but it has moved those other stitches to the angle that we've selected. I'm going to go back to 90 degrees, and then we're going to stitch it out. So I press done and move to start. I'm going to pull up my bobbin thread like I always do. Keep the back of the quilt nice and tidy, or the project, this little mug rug. And I'm going to press go. Now, I'll tell you, when this starts going, I'm going to be paying attention, and it goes at a relatively slow speed, but I'm going to be working the fabric with my hands at the same time because I want to make sure that that stitch looks as good as it can. So there, went into the fabric a little bit, and now we're back to normal. So when we're quilting this type of, in this type of situation, let's say, we've got a top fabric, we've got the batting, we've got the backing, and then on these turned applique pieces, there's actually another 2 layers of fabric. So we've got quite a bit of stuff we're going through. But there, it's going nicely. I'm just making sure. Don't worry about my fingers. I've never actually poked myself. As long as I keep it outside of that big ring there, I'm fine. And here it comes around. Oh, I missed my call right there, but it's okay. And there it does the tack off stitch at the end. So there, I've done that quadrant. Now, I want to do that center circle in the same manner. And we can jump over. Before I do that, I want to show you how I made these circles, because we can actually use QBOT in lots of ways, not just for quilting or decorative stitching. So if we go over to our samples over here, what we've done is, and I'm going to make these circles right now. So here's what we start with. This is Pellon on the back. It's with an adhesive. So once we have the Dresden plate like this, we use a little bit of spray adhesive, and you can see all the layers of fabric on the back there. So in some spots, actually, it's 4 layers deep just on this. But we use the iron and press that down. But to make those perfect circles, you can do it a traditional way on your hand machine and stitch that around, or we can use QBOT to actually make those circles. So back on the frame, we use our designer feature, and we're going to design on the quilt. And here I just have a little side piece of fabric set up. And I'm going to make those circles. So I'll select a little area here, just like that. That's the area I'm going to design in. I press done. And now I can choose a design to put in there. I go into my basic shapes, and we have a little film strip on the bottom. I'm going to put in, I'll do 3 circles just to show the effect. Press done. And now I'm in the modify screen. It automatically pops up on the left. I click that circle, And I want to make it a 2-inch diameter circle. So I say 2. Okay. I'll just place that over here. Then I modify my next design. I'll say, again, I'll type in that I want it 2 inches in diameter. Okay, I'll move that here. And let's say I've got a smaller one that I would need to make for some other project, and I want to make that just maybe 1.5 inches in diameter. I'll move that over here. Just that easy. Then, so I have my designs laid out for this quilt top, or this, actually it's not a quilt top, it's just a piece of fabric that we're going to make into those circles. The backing is the Pellon. The top is this batik, this green batik, and it's right sides together. So I press done. And then in the QBOT V3 Designer, we have a thing called linking. So I'm going to say straight line to link all of those designs together. And then I could save it, but I'm just going to say quilt now and move to start. I sink my needle. So instead of drawing all of this out on my fabric and trying to stitch beautifully on a circle on a domestic machine, I'm going to use the quilting equipment for this purpose. So it does that first circle, goes right into the second one, and then right into the third one. And then I'll pull up my bobbin thread again so we can get back to doing some applique stitches. Okay. So that was just a little quick demo on how we make those circles, and a feature that we have in QBOT V3 Pro, which is the designer feature. And that allows you to, you can design off the quilt or on the quilt. Here, I designed on the quilt or on the fabric just to make those circles. Once we're done with those, we take them off the frame and then we pink around them pretty close, slit the back of the Pellon, flip it inside out, and work a tool into the seam so that it comes out, but it'll come out perfectly circular because the robot can do that beautiful circle or any shape identically every time, which is really nice. So back to our project, we're going to hit Appliqué Echo again. We're going to choose our quilting area again, which is just around this center circle. And now we're going to select, we're going to check, we're going to choose our boundary around the circle. And we have a closed path now because we're actually going all the way around the circle. And I'm going to choose points. Now I'm going to do these pretty precisely. This takes a little bit of time, but I promise it's worth it in the end. I'm just going to go around. And again, the more precise that you can set these points, the better it's going to look. So I'm really kind of going maybe 2 stitch lengths apart from each other around here. If you really want to be precise, you maybe choose 1 stitch length around. Take your time and do it. And this is actually a very interesting example. Oh, now I missed when I was hitting, I missed a couple of points back here when I was tapping the tablet, so I need to go back. That would have been a disaster. Okay, so I'm going to go right here. And now we're going around. When you're actually doing this and you don't have all of the electronics we have hooked up to display the tablet, it gives you an audible feedback that you've actually hit the point. So you wouldn't have that problem of missing a point. I'm really kind of focused just down onto the fabric here. And you can see, hopefully you can see, it's a little bit difficult, but when that dot gets to the edge, it starts to dance around on the fabric. You can see the reflection as it hits. So that's what I'm really trying to hit. Okay, so I'm just about done. That's going to be close enough. I think on the left-hand side, there's a little bit of a gap that's straight. So I'm going to be down with my hands, working it a little bit as we go around. And the smaller you get, when you're doing this stuff, the smaller you get, the tougher it is actually. But we're just doing kind of a small circle here. I don't have any anchor points that I want to do, so I press done. It generates the stitch. I'm going to go to 1/4 inch again, 1/4 inch in between each. I'm going to keep the stitch length just to show a little bit of the options we have. We could, right now we're doing the choices right, so it's putting the stitches into the circle. We can also go to the left. We can also be symmetric, or we could be alternating, which could be kind of neat. I mean, I did the other one. I don't know. Should we do alternating? No, I don't think so. I want to keep it the same as the one we already did. All right, so we're going to move to the start point. I'll show you some examples where we have used all the different methods of those stitches. We have some samples that kind of looks like crazy quilting. Now, again, I'm going to try to keep this going nicely. There we have a nice stitch. There we go. I try to focus really on getting that stitch just on the other side of the outer edge. I don't like it when it gets too in, and I don't like it if it gets too far out. I just think it looks better. If you can get it really tight in there, it just looks so good. It takes a little bit of practice, but it's not going so fast that it's going to be an issue. So you can see it's just going around and doing that decorative stitch. And you might not think that this was possible with a robotic quilting system. When you think of just quilting, this isn't an edge to edge. It's not a block quilting. It's these finishing touches to your quilt that can make all of the difference. So how about that? That's looking kind of nice. Have to say that I did a much better job selecting the points. Probably don't want to talk too soon because I only have 2 stitches left, or maybe 1. I did a much better job selecting those points this time than when I did the outer boundary. In all honesty, I don't want to hide anything from you. But that came out really nice. And if you were doing this on if you were doing this on a home machine, you have that stitch in your home machine, but it's almost not as easy as just what we did here. Now, let me show you some examples before we do the echo part on this and finish this off. Let me show you some examples of where I've used this stitch and done it in decorative ways on quilts and other things. So over here on the overhead cam, what we've got is, this is part of our sampler that we have that shows all of the different features QBOT does. Here's a nice Hawaiian type block that was starched and then steamed onto another piece of fabric. So this is all raw edge applique. And then what I did was I selected a quadrant, and I did one quadrant at a time. And I recommend doing that because for all of those embroiderers out there, you know that as you start putting down stitches, stuff starts to move. So we can be pretty sure that at doing a quadrant at a time, things aren't shifting. So I've done 1 quadrant at a time, and I've chosen a nice thread that complements this. And I've also done the circle in the center, and that looks really good. So this is just pure raw edge applique put down. Then we did an echo, which is a concentric echo of, it looks like just over 3/4 of an inch, maybe almost 3/8 of an inch or 5/16 of an inch. We did 4 echoes, and that looks really nice. So that would be like, okay, that's a nice sample. what about in a quilt? What can you do there? Well, same kind of idea on this quilt. This is raw edge applique. And what we've done here is the same thing. I've changed the stitch length a little bit, but all of this raw edge applique has been placed down and then quilted with the applique stitch. On this one, I didn't do any echo, but here everything is done, and it adds really nice texture to the quilt. Now here's where it kind of gets fun. This is a bag, and this shows a lot of QBOT quilting and what you can do with all of the decorative aspects of this applique stitch. So here I have quilted on both, or stitched on both sides, and then had a center that moves this way and then stitch on both sides. Here we also did, it looks kind of like a baseball stitch, but here we've changed the angle of the stitching. And all I did was I selected, when I was selecting my points, I selected along this line and then pressed go. Over here, some more decorative stitching. And of course you can see I still love that crosshatch. This is done with a Pellon foam underneath it, adds the texture to the bottom of the bag. And I also did this, made the fabric for these handles, if you look at that. And even though it's not crosshatch day, it's applique echo day, adding that crosshatching to the handles before the construction of the bag really adds a lot of visual elements. And then here along this, you can see it was finished off with some parallel echo quilting. And I think you can see that actually a little bit better on this sample of the same genre, where these were echoed around these lines in varying steps. And even though this is an echo, this was actually pretty much line quilting, where I quilted one line and then echoed off of it by offsetting with the line quilting. Again, though, here's the decorative stitching you can see throughout this. It looks it's kind of modern and cool. I like this one a lot. So back to the frame. Let's get into the echo going. And how hard is it to do an echo quilting? Not hard at all. This time, we're going to finish off the rest of this project with an echo. We're going to choose our quilting area. I just go around. I'll choose several points around the perimeter. And I'll be quick when I choose the inner boundary, or what I'm going to echo around. I press done. And I'm going to do a closed path. And I'm just going to select, I'm going to be quick because I know that I'm not up against, the only thing I'm up against is a clock. I'm not up against, in these echoes, I'm not hitting directly around this Dresden block. So just making sure I capture all of my points. And then we're going to just pop in an echo and get it going. Here we go, almost done. And I'm going to do a 3/8 of an inch echo around this. And I'm going to do it in a spiral fashion, just so that it can continue to go. So I have choices. I could say done. I'm going to skip directly to the echo. And I'm going to say 0.375 here, 0.375. I'm going to round my corners, and I'm going to click the stitch to the outer edge, just like that. And even though I missed a point, you can see I missed a point on my star. I'm not going to worry about that. I press done and move to start. It's all automatically trimmed to the boundary. Oh, I should have worried about that. Well, we're just going to go with it, if everybody's okay with that. Nobody's okay with that? Okay, I'm going to go back. I hear in my ear, that is, no, don't do that. Don't ruin a sample. So I'm not going to ruin that. So we'll just go back. And we'll see. Keep going back and back and back. It's easier at some points to just start right over again. Oh, real things happen. What can I say? Appliqué Echo, connected, use offset. Here we go. Again. Well, we might not get it started today, but we do have that sample to the right, which is good. I'll just do 4 points. Now, all of this, by the way, ends up, all that boundary ends up in binding anyway. So let's just make sure I do these points correctly this time. Yeah, this is the better way to do it. And you guys get to see that it happens to everybody. There we go. Here we go. It's looking good now. Guess the goal is always try to make a good sample. Don't cut corners. Pay attention. All that stuff we learn in school. Okay, one more point. Done. Okay, skip to echo. Now we're going to, again, set it right down to 0.375. Boom, boom, boom. We're going to round our corners and we're going to stitch it to the end. And then we just press done. It trims it and we move to the start. Yep, that's better. There we go. Pull up our bobbin and press go. We'll just let that rip around there. And again, it's just that easy. We set it and let it go. And even if you're making a mistake, you got to see it on the screen. And it, you know, something, as soon as I hit that button and said, oh, I saw that I missed a point. Well, just go back, take the extra minute and a half to make it right. And then everything looks good. And if we look back down here, you can see it's, again, stitching beautifully. We'll let it go and you can see how it hits the edge. As it comes around on, you can see where I've done the sample on the right. At some point it overstitches, which is perfectly okay. In this case, overstitching is fine because that gets trimmed and a binding gets put on around it and it just doesn't matter. It gets cut off. But we can just watch this quilt out for a little bit.